This is Curaçao, an island once dismissed as useless. A dry, low-rainfall place with almost no gold, silver, or valuable resources to speak of. And yet today, the name Curaçao shows up all over the world, not just for its brilliant blue beaches, but for a famous shade of blue poured into glasses. The irony is that blue comes from the peel of an orange so bitter, no one wants to eat it. So how did a useless island turn something seemingly worthless into one of its most famous symbols? If your mental image of the Caribbean is dense rainforest and year-round rain, Curaçao will make you rethink that. This is a semi-arid island, sitting entirely outside the region's hurricane belt. Cacti grow up to 6 meters tall, mixed in with thorny scrub and aloe, a landscape closer to desert than the tropical paradise most people picture. Curaçao doesn't stand alone either. Together with Aruba and Bonaire, it forms what's known as the ABC Islands, 3 islands sharing a rare trait in the Caribbean: dry, sitting outside the hurricane belt, and once dismissed as useless by the first Europeans to arrive. And one tree has become the island's most vivid living symbol, the Divi tree. For hundreds of years, the trade winds have blown steadily from a single direction, permanently bending every Divi tree on the island the same way, as if the whole island shares one natural compass, all pointing the same direction. In 1499, the first Spanish explorers arrived here. They found no gold, no silver, and looking at this parched land, concluded there was nothing worth farming. The Spanish officially labeled Curaçao, along with 2 neighboring islands, Islas Inútiles, the useless islands. The entire native population was shipped off to work mines elsewhere, and the islands were essentially abandoned for decades afterward. But Curaçao's history would go on to prove them wrong. To the southeast lies a small, uninhabited island called Klein Curaçao, just 3.5 kilometers, with pristine white sand and an aging lighthouse standing watch over the sea. No residents, no hotels, just wind, sand, and day trip boats that drop visitors off and leave before dark. When the Dutch arrived more than a century later, they saw something far more valuable: a nearly perfect natural deep-water harbor. In 1634, the Dutch West India Company took control of the island and quickly turned the vast Schottegat Bay into one of the largest slave-trading ports in the entire Caribbean. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, thousands of kidnapped Africans passed through this island before being sold onward across the Americas. According to an 1789 census, of the roughly 21,000 people living on the island, nearly 13,000 were enslaved, more than half the entire population. Freedom on this island didn't come in a single moment either. After the Dutch, it was the British who occupied Curaçao twice, from 1800 to 1803, then again from 1807 to 1815, during the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars sweeping across Europe. Both times, the island was handed back to the Dutch once peace returned, as if even ownership of a useless island was still worth fighting over. On the other side of that history stands one of the most remarkable freedom struggles in the Dutch colonial record. On August 17, 1795, a man named Tula stood up and led an uprising at the Knip plantation. He believed that if France, which had just declared freedom for all people and was now occupying the Netherlands itself, held that principle, then that same freedom had to apply to the Dutch colonies as well. Plantation after plantation was liberated. The uprising quickly swelled to nearly 1,000 participants. It lasted more than a month before being crushed. Tula was publicly executed on October 3 of that same year. Slavery wasn't officially abolished on the island until 1863. What's remarkable is that today, Tula is honored as a genuine national hero, with his own monument and an annual day of remembrance. An island once used to imprison the freedom of thousands now honors the man who led the fight to win it back. Nearly a century and a half later, in 1954, Curaçao became part of the Netherlands Antilles, a step toward self-governance, though not yet full independence. In 1969, simmering tensions erupted into street riots known as 30 de May. Workers took to the streets demanding economic reform and fairer treatment for the very people running the island. It was the turning point that forced authorities to rethink how the island's society functioned. It wasn't until October 10, 2010, that the Netherlands Antilles was formally dissolved. From then on, Curaçao stood on its own, no longer one piece of a larger federation, but an independent constituent country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, with far greater self-governance than before. And out of that painful history, over time, a city bursting with color rose along the bay. The historic district of Willemstad, straddling St. Anna Bay, has held UNESCO World Heritage status since 1997. Its most famous row of facades, Handelscade, follows classic Dutch colonial architecture, with the same signature curved gables you'd see in Amsterdam. But instead of white or gray, these houses are dressed in vivid color: yellow, pink, green, orange. There's a good story behind that color. In 1817, a governor banned white-painted walls, officially citing glare reduction under the harsh sun. But another version has circulated for generations, that he suffered from migraines and simply couldn't tolerate the light bouncing off white walls. Whether fact or legend, that ban gave birth to the vibrant palette that defines the city's identity today. Connecting both sides of the bay is the Queen Emma Bridge, a pontoon bridge locals affectionately call the Swinging Old Lady. Operating since 1888, it swings open whenever a large ship needs to pass, then closes again so pedestrians can continue crossing the bay. Right nearby sits the floating market, where small boats from Venezuela once docked daily, bringing fresh fruit and vegetables to sell right at the waterfront. And behind those brilliantly colored facades lies a community even more diverse than the colors themselves. Curaçao's residents today trace their roots to more than 40 different countries: Africa, the Netherlands, all across Latin America, the Sephardic Jewish community, and Portuguese immigrants as well. Out of that mixture, an entirely new language was born, Papiamentu, shaped by enslaved people and Jewish and Portuguese traders alike. Locals still call their island by an affectionate name, Dushi Korsu. Dushi, meaning sweet, lovely. A word that can complement anything from a dish of food to a person to their own homeland. Within the island's diverse religious landscape, Roman Catholicism remains dominant. Roughly 80% of the population practices it, a direct legacy of the Spanish and Dutch who once passed through here. And right in the heart of the old Punda district stands a remarkable house of worship, the Mikveh Israel Emmanuel Synagogue, the oldest continuously operating synagogue in all of the Americas. The congregation has existed since 1651, and the current building was completed in 1732. But the most striking detail is the floor itself, covered in a thin layer of sand, a tribute to their ancestors who once had to worship in secret under the Spanish Inquisition, muffling even the sound of their own footsteps. Few would guess that behind those brightly painted houses along the bay, Curaçao also quietly functions as an international financial center, home to more than 500 registered banks and financial institutions, thanks to favorable tax laws inherited from the Netherlands. An island once considered to have nothing worth extracting is now a place where other people's money is kept. And that same diverse, resilient community also turned this land into one of the wealthiest industrial hubs in the Caribbean. In 1915, Shell decided to build an oil refinery on this parched land. It sounds illogical, since Curaçao itself doesn't hold a single drop of oil underground. But Shell chose the location for its natural deepwater harbor, sitting close to Venezuela's massive oil fields, where Lake Maracaibo was too shallow for large tankers to navigate, and the political situation was far less stable than under Dutch rule. The refinery began operating around 1918, and waves of laborers from Madeira, Suriname, and elsewhere in the Caribbean poured in, completely reshaping the island's population. By World War II, the refinery's importance became unmistakable. At the start of the war, it was processing roughly 11 million barrels of oil a month, making it one of the largest refineries on Earth at the time, fueling the Allied forces. That significance made the island a target. On the night of February 16, 1942, a German U-boat launched torpedoes right in Willemstad's harbor. 2 months later, another submarine shelled the oil storage tanks before being driven off by shore defenses. At its peak, the refinery employed as many as 10,000 workers. Ironically, by 1985, Shell pulled out, selling the plant to the island government for a nearly symbolic price, leaving behind a heavy legacy of pollution. The refinery shut down completely in 2019, and to this day, its future remains uncertain. An island once dismissed as useless once ran the largest oil refinery on the planet, and now that same refinery sits silent, waiting for its next chapter. Looking at the numbers, Curaçao's economy today bears little resemblance to the useless island of 1499. Nominal GDP in 2024 reached roughly $3.56 billion USD, growing nearly 5% that year, driven largely by a strong post-pandemic tourism rebound. But that growth still carries old cracks. Unemployment hovers around 7 to 8%, and inflation, while it cooled to 2.6% in 2024, had spiked as high as 7.4% just 2 years earlier. And in July 2025, the island quietly crossed a milestone few noticed. Its official currency was renamed from the old Netherlands Antillean florin to the new Caribbean florin, XCG, closing out a monetary chapter dating back to its days as part of the Netherlands Antilles. Not everything of value pulled from this parched land came from underground. One thing came from an orange nobody wanted to eat. When the Spanish brought Valencia orange trees to the island, the dry soil and harsh sun left the fruit small, bitter, and nearly inedible on its own. Locals called this orange La Raja. But a Sephardic Jewish family discovered that once dried, the peel of this unwanted fruit released a remarkable fragrance. From that, they created a liqueur now famous worldwide, Blue Curaçao. Its signature bright blue color, as it turns out, is simply food dye, with nothing to do with the orange flavor inside. As for everyday food, the island's Criollo culture blends African, Iberian, and native flavors in dishes like slow-stewed stoba, keshi yena, cheese stuffed with seasoned meat, and funchi, made from cornmeal. And every year, carnival and the rhythm of tumba music turn the whole island into a burst of color and sound that lasts over a month. And if Curaçao's land holds this many fascinating paradoxes, the waters surrounding it hold even more astonishing surprises. Curaçao is ringed by fringing reefs, famous among divers for a phenomenon called the blue edge, where the reef shelf suddenly drops off into deep blue water, letting you dive straight from the shore without ever needing a boat. Near Santa Cruz sits a striking sea cave called the Blue Room, where sunlight filters through the white sand on the floor below, flooding the interior with an otherworldly blue glow. Along the north coast, at Sete Boca National Park, Atlantic waves crash into limestone hollows, launching dramatic bursts of seawater into the air. Inside Cristóbal National Park lives a white-tailed deer subspecies found nowhere else on Earth but this island. Beyond Cristóbal and Sete Boca, there's another national park that gets far less attention but is no less wild. Washington's Slagby, at the island's northern tip, protecting species that survive only on this same dry terrain. In Curaçao's skies, you'll occasionally spot a flash of yellow at the shoulder. That's the lora, the native parrot considered a national symbol, along with flocks of flamingos standing still in the island's brackish lagoons. And at Klein Curaçao, that empty stretch of white sand isn't just photogenic. It's also where sea turtles return each year to lay their eggs. A cycle that quietly continues, whether people show up or not. Ironically, the island's reefs now face their own threat: invasive lionfish, which have no natural predators in these waters. Local authorities allow divers to hunt them with hand spears, the only legally permitted method to help protect the reef ecosystem. Alongside that, local conservation groups run underwater coral nurseries, growing thousands of small coral fragments before transplanting them back onto degraded reefs. And while marine life is being nursed back day by day, on land, the island is entering a new chapter of its own, one just as challenging. Politically, power on the island follows a fairly distinct structure. The King of the Netherlands serves as head of state in name, but actual governance rests with the local government, led by a prime minister, alongside a 21-seat elected parliament. "2025 was a record year for the island's tourism industry, with visitor stays climbing sharply compared to the year before, with the Netherlands, the US, and Colombia as its three largest source markets. Hato International Airport, the island's main gateway, served more than 2 million passengers in 2024, up nearly a quarter from the year before, a number that reflects just how fast tourism has bounced back. Meanwhile, the refinery we mentioned earlier remains shut down to this day. Island authorities are still seeking approval to bring it back online, a future that remains far from settled. Curaçao's location brings both opportunity and challenge. Sitting just 65 kilometers from Venezuela, the island has long maintained close trade ties with its neighbor. But amid Venezuela's prolonged crisis, tens of thousands of migrants have also made their way to Curaçao, many of them now living in legal limbo. International human rights organizations have repeatedly raised concerns, calling on the island to adopt stronger protections for this vulnerable population. And amid recent regional turmoil tied to Venezuela, that same geographic proximity has made Curaçao a point of particular interest for observers around the world. Curaçao now stands at the intersection of a glittering industrial past, a booming tourism present, and a neighboring region still very much in flux. But behind those growth figures lies a longer-term concern. Sea levels around the island are rising by an average of 3 to 4 millimeters a year. For an island that's already dry and low-lying in many areas, that's not a number to take lightly. Authorities have launched a program called Climacorso, a mapping and climate data system designed to anticipate risks from rising seas, drought, and coastal erosion before they become full-blown crises. An island once thought to have nothing to lose is now learning how to hold on to what it has. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Curaçao is that it's never settled into just one role. A place that carries multiple layers of history, multiple cultures, multiple languages all at once, and still manages to forge a distinct identity without erasing any part of it. That's exactly why Curaçao leaves you with such a different feeling once you leave. And eventually, you realize that sometimes a place doesn't need all the things others consider valuable to find its own worth. Thanks for joining Extreme X Travel on today's journey to Curaçao. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to keep exploring the world with us.